The year is 1998. A cool summer night, but the fire roaring before you keeps you comfortable. You sit at ease in a folding chair, reminiscing about the last s'more you ate with a perfectly bronzed marshmallow center. Your father sits down beside you and asks if he's ever told you about the ghost who roams the cemetery just through the woods behind you. You're tired from a long day of hiking, but the startling sound of a branch snapping keeps you alert. Your father makes bizarre voices and dramatic hand motions as he tells you the tale of this ghastly local entity. Or, actually, maybe it wasn't a ghost at all. Maybe it was an escaped psychopath from a nearby asylum, or an old witch who lived in a small cabin, a disgruntled teacher who kidnapped kids, or any other terrifying urban legend you could think of. If you are like me, a 20-something-year-old guy who grew up camping out in the wilderness, you too may have had your first taste of horror in the traditional form of ghost stories over a campfire. I can vividly remember those nights, and can't begin to describe the profound effect it had on my interest in the genre, or my creativity in the future as an avid writer and podcaster. But just a few short years later, following the turn of the century, the medium for ghost stories would change. My name is Steven, and back in 2017, in the midst of the busiest time of my life, in year 2 of grad school, I decided to develop the time-consuming hobby of podcasting about my favorite subject, horror. What would eventually span over 30 interviews of independent horror creatives, from YouTubers to authors, filmmakers, and film festivals. The talks were great, and I made some killer friends, but ultimately I was missing why I loved horror, and that was my chance to tell stories. One of the friends I had made was Ken Artuz, founder of the awesome horror site decaymag.com, which I encourage all of you to go check out. We collaborated together on multiple projects, and I even had an opportunity to write an article for his digital magazine, which I entitled Creepypasta: Campfire Storytelling Evolves into Internet Phenomena. Because despite all of my major horror influences, including late nights playing Resident Evil and Silent Hill, reading Lovecraft, or watching Roger Corman's film adaptations of Poe starring Vincent Price, the major turning point in my life, shifting me from horror fan to creative, was the discovery of a YouTube series called Marble Hornets on a bizarre entity you may have heard of called Slender Man. A unique creature in a simply done web series that left me with tons of burning questions, but none more so than why can't I do that? Which is why creepypasta is so important to the horror community. Before we delve further into that though, let's briefly talk a bit about history. After the turn of the century, the computer age hit, with mass access to an interconnected world we know as the internet. Technology would replace many things in just a few short years in the early 2000s, and with it, the behaviors and traditions of the people. Especially those kids, the millennials, who were also nicknamed the nostalgia generation due to this shift in trends, because they can remember a time without global cell phone usage, the connectivity of Facebook, or the digital dependence on video games. And while I'll leave the debate of whether technology destroyed childhoods to your own personal opinions, it is undoubted fact that for many people there was a great change. And those campfire stories may not have been forgotten, but in many ways were replaced by a new medium. Don't you just love those old chain emails that you have to send out by 3 p.m. or you'll have 576 years of bad luck? Well, things like that, or those irritating stories that filled message boards or countless websites were known as copypasta or copypasta, due to their nature of being copied and pasted, which eventually led to some of those annoying stories being passed on with a much darker edge, grounded in reality, with anonymous authors, so a source to confirm their legitimacy could never be found. And thus was born creepypasta. While I don't think it would be unfair to say these started springing up in the early to mid-2000s, the genre as we know it wouldn't be established by name until a few years later. As I said, in order to promote a level of legitimacy, the earliest stories weren't credited with an author and seemed to have popped up out of nowhere one day. They would cover bizarre topics like lost episodes of TV shows, which were discarded due to some disturbing plot, or some ritualistic existence of strange artifacts which need to be collected to perform something bizarre, or even just a first-hand account of some devious act. Eventually, these stories would circulate and garner more attention, and people would make twists of their own. Stories which took us to dark creatures in foreboding forests, to discover ancient beasts lurking in abandoned buildings, or even to facing the sheer terror of having your privacy invaded, the sanctity of your own home desecrated by some twisted invader. This was the evolution of a genre nearing the completion of the first decade of the new millennium. An outburst of stories reaching across the world in ways never thought of outside of mainstream printing or film release. This blossoming new genre would soon transcend the typeface, though, quickly becoming video series like Marble Hornets, images like Smile Dog, modded games like Ben Drowned or sonic.exe, and countless admirers of the genre creating an endless stream of accompanying fan art. But with any good thing that brings joy and mass followings, comes a few bad eggs. Unfortunately, a string of bizarre crimes occurred in the name of these fictional creatures we fear from our computer screens. Beings like Laughing Jack and Slender Man accounting for most of the notoriety, with the most notable count being the 2014 Slender Man stabbings, where a 12-year-old girl was stabbed 19 times by two mentally unstable preteens in the name of a fictional being. While this tragedy should have been averted, the wrong reason was blamed for its cause. And despite a huge shift in culture and technology at the turn of the century, an age-old fight was revived: the war on horror. Because no matter how progressive we become, childhood tragedy always needs a scapegoat. Despite all this newfound controversy, though, creepypasta persisted. All those weirdos like us who got strange looks for enjoying horror, those of us who receive concerned glances for the darkness we write, and those of us who find comfort in the face of annihilation, we persisted. And as the rest of the world would soon find out, we weren't leaving, making bigger waves than ever before. Pen Pal showed us that a series of short stories on a message board could explode into demand for a published novel. Countless YouTubers revived the dying art of audio dramatizations with their narrations of an endless stream of stories. Professional voice actors took this a step further with hit shows like the No Sleep podcast, and stories based on childhood horrors, haunted houses, unexplainable staircases, and hidden doors made for one of the most alluring horror anthologies ever seen on TV, Channel Zero. After all, where can a 20-year-old write a story that is viewed by hundreds of thousands, a feat normally reserved for the likes of King, Barker, and Lovecraft? And wild successes aside, what makes creepypasta most important is that it provided the world with a community of like-minded individuals who love storytelling. A place for kids, young adults, and anyone else to try their hand at something they've always strived to do. To produce a story, to record their voice, or to film a spectacle that they had been too shy or nervous or apprehensive to perform before. What other genre allows for participation in so many ways? As a reader, writer, producer, actor, creator, or just a fan. A community which allows for a safe place to provide entertainment for the masses by exploring a passionate hobby, or maybe even discovering the chance at a career. Creepypasta has empowered thousands to create and come together across the globe in ways unimaginable by our fathers who told of local legends at the campfire. To my fellow horror enthusiasts, keep reading, writing, drawing, acting, and narrating. Just keep creating because horror is beautiful, no matter how controversial it is to some. A genre that expresses the only universal human emotion, fear, and lets us explore that darker side of life that so many choose to ignore. I hope you enjoyed this. It's my love letter to the creepypasta community. And please share to keep our tales of death and destruction quite alive. Thanks again for listening to Possessed Radio, and look forward to more horror content soon. And if you liked the video, please be sure to subscribe. But for now, take care. And as always, keep the lights off.